Hey everyone, Ryan here. So stop me if this is news to you, but one of the original Power Rangers is still considered one of the most recognisable and iconic of all time. Even people who know very little about Power Rangers know that the Green Ranger was kind of a big deal, as exhibited by the amount of people who continue to comment on the new movie simply asking, "Where's Tommy? Where is Tommy? What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tommy?" Many will also know that Tommy will eventually become the White Ranger. Admittedly though, their knowledge bank probably stops there, and they don't know that he goes on to become 3 more Rangers. There's not exactly t-shirts for that though. But if you think about it, the White Ranger and Tommy were synonymously the springboard or the catalyst for change in terms of moving the show away from Mighty Morphin and eventually embracing other incarnations. 1 or 2. For the benefit of casual fans, the Mighty Morphin White Ranger was actually the 6th Ranger of the following series in Japan, Gosei Sentai Dai Ranger. We saw some of the other suits from that series for the first time in 2014's Power Rangers Super Megaforce, curiously retrospectively inserted as Power Rangers Squadron. Even in the last big Power Rangers 20 anniversary, when every Red Ranger was represented in a promo pic, Tommy as White Ranger was there front and centre. Though for some reason he was taken out of the later version of the promo picture. If you've watched the show, you'll remember Zordon demoting Jason and making Tommy the White Ranger the new leader of the team. "This is great," Jason said through gritted teeth. In no other series was a living Red Ranger's leadership title taken away from them, so this was huge. It also seemed more to do with external fandemonium than anything else. But really now I just think it was about telling kids, listen, new Power Ranger powers are going to come along from time to time, just go with it. It should come as no surprise then that as popular as the Green Ranger is, and continues to be one of Bandai's most lucrative avenues, they've pumped out just as many, and in some cases more, products of the White Ranger. Today we're talking about Bandai's 12 White Ranger figures that have all been released over the last 5 years. Now, full disclosure, I don't have every White Ranger ever. Super Legend figures back in 2008 weren't even released in England, so I've only ever seen them online. And at the time I didn't think the 2013 figure art was worth the money. I wasn't majorly collecting then, so my set is both very modern and very postmodern. Okay, brace yourself. Let's start by listing these 12 White Ranger figures that have come since the Power Rangers 20 anniversary. Number 1, the Armoured White Ranger of 2013. This was the 3rd of 10 collector's figures in the short-lived 7-inch scale. Seemingly they were a response to figure arts, which were storming the collector's market at the time. These superhero proportion figures retailed for a respectable $19.99, or $19.99 in pounds where I live. I got mine much cheaper on sale in Target for about $8.49, or at the time about £5.50. Even at the time that seemed crazy money, and now given what they charge for the same kind of thing just a few short years later, it's practically change. There is lots of posability here, and also an action card game trading card which you can use in the Megaforce Gosei Morpher. Number 2, the 2013 SH figure art. Considered by many to be the quintessential representation of the character, SH Figure Arts, a collaboration between Bandai and Tamashii Nations, burst onto the US scene in October 2013, priced at $40. They were pitched at the Serious Action Figure Collector, and to quote the description, feature meticulous attention to detail, accurate proportion, and advanced articulation characteristic of the SH Figure Arts line. 4 years on, and this is still unquestionably the go-to figure in terms of on-screen accuracy. Number 3 then, the Metallic Force Mighty Morphin White Ranger from 2013. Later in the same year as the Armoured White Ranger figure, Bandai released one of the final action figures in the 4-inch scale that they'd been doing for 4 years. They took it all the way back to when the scale started with a new pearl-coloured repaint of the original 4-inch White Ranger, which had been released in America as part of the toy line for the Disney MMPR reversion in 2010. Perhaps because they never got anywhere near the White Ranger in the on-screen episodes, the original White Ranger figure was released in very small quantities towards the end of the line. Obviously it became one of the hardest to find, one of the worst to buy on the aftermarket. This new version includes all the accessories that came with the original, along with another action trading card for use in the Megaforce Gosei Morpher, and yep, another thing, just like in 2010, this one was released towards the end of the line and in small quantities. Number 4, the Super Megaforce Action Hero White Ranger from 2014. Straight after the 4-inch figure re-release, Bandai didn't keep us waiting very long for another shot at it. The 2014 Super Megaforce line found a new scale termed the Action Hero, which was closer to what we'd had in the past and meant figures felt more substantial and looked less microscopic when on display. Because of the Ranger changing theme, Bandai took the opportunity to celebrate the extensive varied history of the show by releasing a collection of 28 red and 6 Rangers. Not to get sidetracked, but this was the very first time we'd had every Red Ranger in the same scale, except for Samurai Lauren, who's still only available as a 4-inch figure. Number 5, Legacy White Ranger 2014, the Super Megaforce variant. So, having seen success with the Power Rangers 20th anniversary Legacy products, Bandai thankfully decided to keep the nostalgia coming by adapting the entire MMPR team in the new 5-inch scale and releasing them in very nostalgic triangular boxes, just like the original 8-inch figures came in. Originally, these were $5 more than the Super Megaforce Action Heroes, and all you're really getting for that is a nicer box, which I can't imagine cost any more, as it's the same amount of card and plastic, but painted weapons, which as we've learned recently, are very much needed. Apparently the gold on this version is shinier too, but I can't remember as I thought they were exactly the same figure. Number 6, the Super Megaforce White Ranger Key. As discussed in my last video, the gimmick for Super Megaforce allowed Bandai to revisit the past as a key part of the roleplay products of that season. The White Ranger Key came midway through the year in a 3-pack with Armored Red and the Green Ranger. It's arguable whether this counts as an action figure, but I wanted to include it because it's another White Ranger we didn't have before. Number 7, the Mighty Morphin White Ranger Key Super Megaforce toy line San Diego Comic-Con 2014 exclusive limited edition metallic variant. Again, as you remember from last time, there was also a metallic version of the White Ranger Key. Just like the 4-inch figure, Tommy now has been given a metallic pearl colouring. This was only available at SDCC, only 700 were produced, so I do count myself quite lucky to have one. Number 8, the Armored White repackage in 2014. Super Megaforce also re-released the exact same armoured figure from the year before for another pass. This time though, there was no trading card, but otherwise it's exactly the same other than in a different box. There's no Power Rangers 20 logo anymore. Number 9, the Legacy White Ranger Power Rangers the Movie Edition from 2015. Not so long after the first wave of Mighty Morphin Power Ranger 5-inch figures, Bandai came back with another set to collect, and this was the first time that we ever had the movie suits done properly. We had them in the same nostalgic triangular boxes as the first set, similar pricing, but slightly better articulation in the head and feet, and therefore it was more collector focused. Number 10, the Mix and Morph White Ranger from 2015. This is one I forgot about until right before filming. It was released in a line made for much younger fans. I expect Bandai were hoping that parents of young children would recognise it for being the MMPR White Ranger and buy it for their own kids. It was only available in a sort of double pack with a little Tigerzord model, and pieces of both of them could be brought together to become the Tigerzord Warrior mode. Yeah, there's not a lot to say about this one. Number 11, the limited edition Tokyo vinyl Mighty Morphin Power Rangers White Ranger San Diego Comic-Con 2015 exclusive limited edition again. So 1 year after the exclusive key set, Bandai decided to make one of the 2015 SDCC exclusives a White Ranger Tokyo vinyl figure. What's interesting about this one is that it was a genuine convention exclusive. There's no normal way to get this one, though obviously very similar products by other companies are available. Finally, number 12, the Legacy Collection Mighty Morphin White Ranger 2017. Last year, Bandai started the new high-end Legacy collection of figures, and now in Wave 3, we've just had the new White Ranger released in this 6.5-inch scale. It's highly articulated, it rounds off the MMPR team, and costs $20. Like with the last few collector figures, we get a painted Saber, and this time even a holster for it as well. Can you actually believe there's been 12? I actually own 7 of the 12 of them, so let's get into some comparisons. I'm just going to get this one out of the way to begin with. Here's a look at both the versions of the Super Megaforce Key. See, one is slightly shinier than the other. The things you gotta do, eh? Onto the little figures then. The proportions here are almost comic booky. The head is tiny, the neck is non-existent, it's got massive hands, but it's not necessarily Bandai's fault because that's kind of what MMPR became that year. MMPR 2010 is often lauded as the worst Mighty Morphin toys we've ever had, and I think in terms of collectors chasing accuracy, that's certainly true, but it was a major stepping stone, and I don't think we'd be where we are today without it. Without fans critiquing what Bandai gave us that year, I don't think we would have the highly detailed equivalents today, and even in the mainline, they at least try to be a lot more show accurate. Legacy White Ranger 5" is a very serviceable figure. The shoulder pads on mine are a little bit marked, but other than that I don't really have anything negative to say about it. For a while I thought that this was me done with the White Rangers because this fixed a lot of the problems that the previous 4" one had. I think with this I expected more differences from the Super Mega Force line version of the figure. So save for the very sparse painted detail on Saba, which was just one flat white colour in the cheaper version, they're exactly the same. However, these two very minor reasons were convincing enough for me to get the Legacy version, and I was getting the rest of the team that way anyway. At least for now, the movie 5" are our final Legacy stab in this scale, and they definitely went out on a high when they released this in April 2015. Can you believe it took Bandai 20 years to attempt the movie suits in toy form? They are so perfect though, no weird superhero muscles, just well constructed figures. I did wonder how they would detail the paneling of the suit, but it's all there, and it just looks phenomenal. Interestingly, they painted the belt pattern on the 4" figure. The figure art, to my knowledge, is the only other figure to have that painted in. The crazy thing here is it's actually screen accurate to be painted, but I'll admit it does look a bit strange when they do, almost distracting. It looks better unpainted, which seems to be a decision Bandai had taken time and again on our behalf. However, the bevel detail is always there in case you want to get crafty and fill it in yourself. Because movie White Ranger had a morpher just like the other 5 Rangers, so the belt pattern isn't an issue here, I like that they did that in the movie, and I think it drew him a lot closer to the rest of the MMPR team, and the team were drawn a lot closer to him by all having matching coin chest emblems. Even with his completely different shield and helmet, these little design cues really drew them together and made them a much more cohesive team. They actually looked like they came from the same series. They've really pushed it as much as they could here, but I expect that the limitations of the mold is one of the main reasons that caused Bandai to decide to swap to another scale for the continued Legacy figures. Having said that, I really appreciate that 4 years in, we still have the Action Heroes scale going in both the main and the new movie lines. I really hope they don't stray from it anytime soon because it is nice to have multiple teams in the same scale. I would even like it if they continued releasing old teams in this 5" scale. Who knows what the 25th anniversary will bring for us next year? Mystery. Onto the bigger figures, the Armoured White. So the idea here is to dress up a very heavily MMPR influenced base figure. I believe this is only the second time we've had a figure with gold diamond emblems on after the Super Legends. It's not actually screen accurate, but it's a nice touch. The poses you can pull off with this guy are really great. When you finally get the armour on him, which does take a while, the shield armour does look a little bit too bulky for him, but I think that was the nature of the armoured line for whatever reason. He's kind of been superseded now, but it was a great figure at the time, and I had hoped they were going to carry on doing MMPR back then, but I had to wait and change scales once again for that to happen. The new Legacy figures, as you'll see from my other review, aren't always great. They suffer from things like loose joints. I don't like how the ab crunch disrupts and spoils the suit design normally. Here it's hidden by the armour piece, so that's good. And it's probably one of the best served examples in the line. The ratcheting shoulders introduced in the last wave seem to have been watered down a bit this time, which is good because you don't feel like you're doing damage to it just to pose it. The scale still works well in terms of detail from a distance, though it doesn't look overbearing next to Legacy Megazords. There's a bunch of great details about them, like the jointed elbows and knees, and being able to pivot pose the feet is pretty great. I will say the figure art looks better, but I can't in good conscience call that a toy because it's not the sort of thing you'd want to give to a kid. To their credit, all of Bandai's mainline figures are just fine for children to play with. Some are a little more frustrating than others, but especially with this new Legacy line, they really get the balance very even between fun factor and detail, so it kind of pleases the kids and the older fans alike. Speaking of old ones, shall we see how these stack up against my original White Ranger figures? So apologies for the yellow plastic, I can only hope that my new ones don't do the same if I still have those after 20 years. The white flip head is to me the most iconic from my childhood. He's wearing a shiny shield I found in the Bronx in 2013 on a $2 bootleg Red Ranger, but it serves the purpose as I'd probably trodden on mine years before and it's now in pieces. Something that was crazy fun about this when I was a kid was mimicking the actions of the teenagers living a normal life before a monster attacks and then they had to morph into action. "It's Morphin time" is the most iconic line from this franchise, and these figures really just embodied that. You don't really get that fun factor anymore. The action figure lines now, they're just normal action figures, and I think that's a crucial thing that's missing. I know, they're making a few spin movie Morphin figures this year, and they have tried it a few years ago with Samurai, but they're really bulky, great things. They're out of scale with everything else. They can't hold anything, they can't sit down, they never do a complete team. So those newer Morphin figures can never be your go-to team because they don't make the team. Way back when, the Auto Morphins were crucial to me. The fact that their main 5 included combinable weapons so you could make a power blaster was just made them all the more epic. So the joints on them haven't fared well, it's incredibly loose now, all of them, but to their credit, they can still stand. The 8-inch White Ranger, the only way to get this back in the day was with your deluxe Tigerzord. It never really got that much playtime because it was just too big, which is why it's probably still in such good condition, sans one sunburnt arm. It actually has pretty good detail and the proportions are fine, no overtly muscular build. I can see why people used to love the 8-inch line. Also interesting how we've just had Saber on pegs for the last few years, but even back in the 90s they knew how to solve it and store Saber in different scales with a nice friction holster. The Kellogg's 2-inch. This one we'll only consider briefly because it was made by Kellogg's cereal in the UK and not by Bandai, but I wanted to show that back in 1995 there was a way of getting a movie accurate White Ranger. It's just it was only 2 inches, it's basically made of rubber, and it had no posability. Next to the new Legacy Edition it's obviously similar, and next to the keys it's just funny. Saber has certainly come a long way from its humble beginnings as one flat piece of grey plastic, but it's mostly kept the same form factor. I think how stunning the painted versions look now. Every new mould we've had from Armoured White Ranger onwards has been another massive step change. It's great to be able to say that this year's newest doesn't lose any of what's been gained recently, and it probably looks the best overall. There's no peg on the other sides. I'm sure most of you will have worked this one out already, and hopefully you agree with me. My League of the Legacy figures then are, in last place sadly, the metallic. Just above it, the armoured. Then, the Legacy 5-inch. Then, slightly better, the Legacy Movie 5-inch. And finally, the Legacy Collection White. Interestingly, I've got them ranked in order of release date, that is if you remember that the 4-inch White Ranger was based on an earlier mould. I think Bandai have been doing wonders for MMPR over the past 5 years. And while I hope this is it for the time being, come on, we know at this rate they're going to do a metallic White Ranger in the Legacy Collection, don't we? I'm very glad with what I've got, I'm happy with my Legacy line. Credit to them in keeping at it and producing so many versions of the same thing that are just increasingly getting better, so we can't refuse them. There are plenty of other produced White Rangers that I haven't mentioned in this video. There's Fisher-Price's Imagine X line, which Bandai doesn't have anything to do with. Same goes for Pop Vinyls, which I did try to research for this video, but I just got very confused very quickly by how many there are. Then there's the Funko plush toy, the Loyal Subjects minifigures. Basically, whichever avenue you take lately, there's a lot of White Rangers out there. That's your lot then for this one. There are lots of reviews for all these figures, much longer ones on YouTube. I've obviously put my 2 cents in for the Wave 3 figure. Thank you for all the comments you've been sending lately. There's been some good questions, there's been some very good spotting of the little custom things that I've done that I've kind of forgotten I've done. Question to you guys, am I the only one that preferred the Automorphin figures back in the 90s? Would you like to see them done properly again, possibly in the Retro Revival line? Or if they could somehow do the Action Hero or the Legacy Collection in Automorphin style? I don't even know how that would work. But if it could be done, as much as it pains me to think this, I know that's probably what would cause me to buy them all over again. Just an idea. Next time I'm going to be talking about the movie. Very excited. But until then, happy hunting. See you later.